Ablaze was an indie fanzine stemming from music in Manchester and Leeds. What got you to do the zine, and do you find it could still exist today, as in a reissue or something similar to it?
What got me to do it? There used to be like a really huge scene with like loads and loads of fanzines, like hundreds and thousands of them in the UK in the 80s. And I guess I kind of tapped into that, like I was reading other people. The infrastructure then is so different to what it is now. So I used to pick them up everywhere, like gigs, record shops, stuff like that. And we used to listen to John Peel on the radio, and he would like talk about these fanzines, and you'd send off for them, like you'd write letters, and ended up having correspondences with other fanzine writers. So you start off from this point of you're just a consumer, you're just a fan, and you're reading other people's fanzines thinking they're really amazing. And then you get closer and closer to them because you're writing them these letters, and you may be writing them letters like every day or something like that, you know, because these people are accessible. Gradually, I started to think maybe, just maybe, I could write something. And I think I just wrote like one page for like somebody's fanzine. And then I heard a show on the radio that talked about, it was basically like the DIY ethos of fanzines, like it's easy, it's cheap, you can do it, like anyone can do it, and you should do it, and you should get out there and do it now, kind of thing. I was quite enthused by that, and it was kind of like a new idea. It was like I could do that, you know, because it's like that seemed like these amazing people, these like gods. So it kind of put it in my grasp. It's a pity I've not got them with me actually. The very early ones that I did were like, well, you can see them in here, they're like really small, kind of scrappy, tiny little things. That even then it took me like a lot of courage to build up to even, you know, printing like 5 copies of the first one. So it's just this really gradual process that once I started, the really crucial like moment, I was at college and it was like 2 A4 pieces of paper that had been photocopied and folded, and I printed like 5 of them, and I took them to the cafeteria, and I think I probably even just, I don't know if I sold them or handed them out to people that I knew. And when I stepped back and I looked back and I could see them reading them, like it meant something to them. And I guess I was like 16, 17 at the time, and it was the first time that I felt anybody take any notice of me in my life. So it had such a powerful impact on me that I was hooked, and I went and I photocopied more of them, and then every fanzine I did, I printed more and more and more. I was like addicted to it. I became competitive with all the other fanzine writers, just until I was printing like 5,000 copies. And to go back to your original question, like how did it relate to the music scene? I think in the 80s there was a strong feeling that you shouldn't just be a consumer, that you should also be producing something. So the very best thing you could do is to be in a band, and if you couldn't be in a band, then you should probably do a fanzine or put on gigs or something. And it was almost like you should be actively seen to be contributing to the music scene. So because everybody felt like that, then it was a very, very rich music scene with everybody kind of pitching in with something or other. So it was almost like your duty. You kind of had to. And if you love music, then it's like you felt guilty if you weren't kind of building something, you know, in the music scene.
You're from Manchester yourself, and during the 80s, do you feel like you were inclined to the independent music scene there?
Yeah. So yeah, I still didn't properly explain that, how it was kind of linked to the music in Manchester. I was very interested in like indie music from everywhere, but I started to notice that there was a lot of bands in Manchester. And when I was at college, like before this is a long time ago, so before they had media studies, they had something called communication studies, and I did that, and there was a chance to do a project, and I was like, can I do like a fanzine? And they were like, well, if you do something else with it. So they agreed if I did a compilation tape with it. And basically I was inspired by, there's loads of really cool bands in Manchester and nobody's writing about it, nobody's documenting it. This is 1987. So I put together this thing called Made in Manchester that had the Stone Roses in it and loads of other bands, and bits of it are in this book. And yeah, I spent my time at college like going around pubs and meeting bands and interviewing them, or part of my time anyway. I did do some work, other work, and yeah, so I got this fanzine out that was like a celebration of music in Manchester, and then I don't know, about a month later it was Manchester.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that my fanzine had any influence on that at all, but I think it was just the time, you know, that people were just suddenly kind of going, oh my god, Manchester, you know. So it's just that moment.
Manchester was dance and independent music came together during the Stone Roses and Happy Mondays.
Yeah, I mean, Happy Mondays, well, the Stone Roses were not a dance
No.
thing. Like, their early stuff was really rock, and that was the stuff that I liked, because I was kind of coming from like punk, post-punk, goth and indie. Stone Roses were like massively rock and a little bit gothy, although they would never have like admitted it. And Happy Mondays, the first album, you probably know it. This is very, very interesting. It's incredibly original music that it doesn't fit into anything else at all. And yeah, so I was just interested in all these kind of weird little bands like that then went on to be, you know, huge.
What do you think of the Indian alternative music in Manchester since the Blaze stopped?
Since the Blaze stopped, I've kept in touch with the music scene in Leeds a lot more, because I lived in Leeds, you know, for quite a lot of that time since. And I've really enjoyed like the kind of DIY underground scene. So the kind of bands you'd see if you go to Wolf Chambers. So many amazing Leeds bands. Like my favourite would be Cowtown. Yeah, I feel like I should list them now, and I haven't got them in the top of my head. So maybe I'll come back to you with a list. But there's been like dozens of really, really cool like underground bands in Leeds, like since I stopped doing a Blaze. So I'm basically in love with that scene.
What do you think of Manchester's musical heritage, and do you think the passion for music is still well and truly thriving?
Yeah, I mean, Manchester's musical heritage, it's so rich, isn't it? And I mean, it's unfortunately recently it's been characterised by losses. Like we lost Marquis Smith from the Fall, which, you know, I can't begin to kind of describe the importance of the Fall for Manchester and for music. And then we lost Pete Shelley from the Buzzcocks, and I mean, I don't normally kind of have that emotional reaction when somebody dies. Like I'm just, everybody else is freaking out because David Bowie's died, and I'm like, okay, but when Pete Shelley died, I was just heartbroken for a fortnight, because it seemed like as if your memories were being ripped away from you, and of course they're not. But when you realise that, you know, you and all your friends are so like completely bound up in this music that it's almost like the kind of fabric of your childhood and your growing up and everything, you know. Yeah, no, Manchester has an incredible musical heritage, and of course you've still got, you know, like really cool bands like Ill. I think that's an all-girl band from Manchester that are doing really well at the moment.
Do you feel like more connected to Pete Shelley's death as you're from Manchester and the Buzzcocks made the Sex Pistols gig happen, and that's when like the start of DIY independent make your own band came along?
Yeah, I mean, I felt so connected to it, like not even really even directly thinking about that, how that heritage has affected me. It was just more of an emotional level, like connection with the songs and stuff. But there's people out there who were, you know, who formed their bands because they went to that Sex Pistols gig with the Buzzcocks. You know, there's people whose lives were like much more dramatically affected. I almost felt like a fraud for like feeling it so much, but it's like, yeah, it's almost impossible to say like how much impact the Buzzcocks on their own have had. You know, just as a punk rock band, they're just so special, so poppy, and with like a queer singer as well. You know, they were just totally like ahead of everybody else.
Why did Ablaze stop, and do you think there will be a chance of it reissuing?
I don't know if it's really stopped actually, because when we were talking before about it stopping, I was thinking it's stopping in 1993, but then this one came out like 22 years later. So I always thought I would do like the next issue, and I did. Should I talk about the differences between in that of doing the fanzine, that because it was kind of an experiment of, you know, what happens if you stop it and then come back 2 decades later. Yeah, it's completely different. Like
The newest one's completely different from the old
the
one.
experience of doing a fanzine now as opposed to so back then there was the infrastructure, there was the support, like everybody cared about your fanzine, you know, the shops would take it, and you know, it was easy to sell it in gigs. It was completely normal at gigs to be, you go to a gig and you'd be approached by, if you weren't approached by 2 or 3 fanzine sellers trying to sell you a fanzine while you were trying to watch the band or whatever, it would have been wrong, you know, it was completely normal. Whereas now, everything's much more corporate, it's much more mainstream. The shops might not want to take the fanzine because it's not sort of part of their like mainstream distribution networks. People don't buy it as much, because back then that was how you got your information. Now you get your information for free on the internet. Why would you want to spend £5 on some information when the information's free? You know, even if it smells really good. It smelled back when it was fresh from the printers. Even if it's like a beautiful object, that people are not really interested in that, or they don't see. Or there's also a lot of free magazines. So a magazine is kind of seen as like a kind of worthless throwaway thing. And the culture of selling zines at gigs has disappeared. So I was in London, I was at perhaps the most DIY place in London, which is called DIY Space for London, and I'm trying to sell a fanzine to people. I'm thinking that, you know, they will be ready for this, that they'll know what a fanzine is, they'll know what's going on if I walk up to them and go, hi, do you want to buy my fanzine? It's got all these things in it. And I went to these people and they acted like I was trying to do something to them, like I was invading their space, and I was trying to cheat them or rip them off or something like that, and they looked at me with real suspicion. It was like, oh my god, it's just gone. All Tomorrow's Parties festivals, it stopped a couple of years ago now, but they were like festivals that are running at like holiday camps around the UK, and selling fanzines there, I'd either be selling them to the old guard, like people about the same age as me, who'd go, oh my god, a fanzine, brilliant, I'll just give you the money, I don't care who's in it, I just want it. And then there'd be young people that would just be like, what is it, who's made it, who gets the money, is it authorised? And so I have to kind of answer all these questions before you could even talk about what was going on. So it's kind of like that, you know, that whole thing is missing.
What do you think, like, the main difference with your fanzine and just general magazines? Because for young people today, they might look at it as a general magazine about indie music.
I don't think it's too different. Like the presentation is, you know, because I mean, when I did it before, we didn't have computers really, didn't have a PC. Like to have a PC at that time, it would cost like £1,000, which was, you know, even more money back then than it is now. But because everyone's got this technology now, it's like it's easy to produce, so it looks, you know, like something that you might expect to find. It's easy to read and stuff. Except the only thing is, I still tried to cram too much content into whatever it is, like 60 pages. So you get like really small typeface. That's hard to read, that you wouldn't normally, and normally you'd have like a lot more space on the page, like you'd probably have all this would be like white space and stuff, and is it, you know, so maybe you needed another 30 pages or something if it was going to look like that. But when you're the one that's paying the printing bill, then you know, you can't necessarily afford to, you know, so that's kind of a difference. It's not funded by advertising.
So it's an independent magazine for independent music.
Yeah, I mean, you can have an independent magazine that's funded by advertising. This one's funded by well, no, actually, I've got some. That's Norman Records. I've got advertising in it. Sorry, it's part funded by advertising, but yeah, it's not like a commercial proposition. Like these days, I don't think you would start a magazine because unless you had some kind of funding, you wouldn't start a magazine without like a business plan, and you would be. If it's a free magazine, then you will be selling an awful lot of advertising, and it would be centred around that. And that's not what this is. So.
What are your favourite moments or memories of Ablaze, of being a part of it?
It was generally an awful lot of fun to do, like especially as it built up over time, and we had a team. So it was my thing, but I kind of attracted all these like other like writers and people that just wanted to help me with it and work on it. And some of us lived in a house together in Leeds, and we'd get like a lot of letters because it was pre-internet. People wrote letters. The people basically write you their life stories, so you just get all this stuff in the post, and you'd be like, "Oh, what's this?" And we also got promo from record companies, PR companies, and. So I think a favourite moment for me is the day the postman turned up with a sack, and it's full of vinyl and letters. You know, it's like Christmas, but it's just Tuesday. You know, so you kind of run in this magazine in your kitchen, and it's like, yay, like amazing. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many amazing bands that we got to interact with. I don't know if you know Pavement. They were. That's my cat scratching the sofa. You're not supposed to do that. Pavement were. It's a real shame you haven't got the camera trained on. Pavement were just one of the most amazing bands in the 90s, and we had the privilege of basically releasing their first UK release because we used to like put out music with the fanzine. So I don't know if you know about like flexi disc. So there's kind of like bendy records, and yeah, we put out a flexi disc with Pavement on, and yeah, just before Pavement became like the biggest thing.
Who was the best to interview?
So I feel like I should say like we were talking about Nirvana before, but I had the opportunity to interview Nirvana when they were doing a gig in Sheffield, Nevermind tour, and I just rang up a mate in Sheffield and said, could you just go and interview Nirvana for me please, because I want to see Shudder to Think in Leeds. So Shudder to Think were this band from Washington DC that were kind of really like angular, a little bit like math rock, with a really charismatic lead singer that was singing a falsetto voice. And yeah, so I think my happiest interview moments was sitting there with Craig Wedren, the singer of Shudder to Think, and I was perfectly happy to delegate Nirvana to somebody else, because it's like, although on that night with Shudder to Think around soundcheck time, we were very excited to watch Nirvana's first Top of the Pops performance broadcast, so that was exciting enough. But then yeah, I got to see Shudder to Think as well, so
Were Nirvana not that big then, and do you have any regrets of going to see Shudder to Think and not Nirvana?
Well, Nirvana were that was like the moment, so they were on Top of the Pops. It was, so watching Nirvana on Top of the Pops was like, that's one of our bands, but they're on Top of the Pops, it's just, they just crossed over at that very second, and we were all kind of like, what? Like, how does that happen, because this is like the DIY underground scene, and then hang on, they're famous, they're on TV. So that, yeah, it was just that, it was that exact moment when it happened. So they'd gone from the level of, say, a band like Shudder to Think, and then they just, yeah, they just moved across. But I was more interested in other bands than Nirvana. I didn't think they were good, they could be great live, could be a powerful rock band, but they weren't the most inventive or interesting, and there was so much amazing music at that time, so yeah, they were kind of a little bit down the list.
Was there anyone in Manchester that was fun to interview?
So yeah, so we were going to talk about interviewing the Stone Roses. I wouldn't. They were the opposite of fun to interview, because they were so kind of miserable and sort of sarcastic and grumpy, and I don't know, like a little bit aggressive. I don't know what it was, but you know, they wanted to talk to you, but they didn't. I don't know. I guess it's just that mix of personalities. You know, they didn't really want to give anything away or relax, or I don't know. It's hard to say what the kind of forces that were going on with them. Yeah, I probably had more fun interviewing John Robb from the Membranes than I did interviewing Nirvana. No, not Nirvana. Stone Roses. Wake up.
Why was it that Ian Brown swore at you?
So Ian Brown told me to fuck off when the Stone Roses were playing Leeds Poly, which is now Leeds Met. I showed up to the gig and he was in the foyer and he was just shouting, "Fuck off! I won't do an interview for your fanzine. I'll give you the time of day, but I won't do an interview for your fanzine." And I'm like, okay. And what it was that in the first or second issue of Ablaze, I did a review of the second single, Sally Cinnamon, and I didn't like it. I really liked the early stuff, the rock stuff, and I didn't like the change of direction in a more poppy direction. Well, obviously they did, because that was what they were all about and their hearts and souls were in it. So then for me to kind of, you know, call it whatever, a pile of puke or whatever I called it, was just unbearable. Even though it was just this tiny little scrappy fanzine that, you know, just done by this teenage girl, it was enough to make them really upset. Which is another kind of aspect of the power of fanzines. And this book, I now think I should have called it The Art of Upsetting Pop Stars, because that's what I was inadvertently really good
Isn't
at.
there a letter from Morrissey?
Yeah, Morrissey that was really weird. So the Smiths played the Free Trade Hall in, I don't know, it's like 1984, and the Free Trade Hall, it doesn't exist now, but it was like a venue that it would be used for like orchestra concerts.
Isn't that where Sex Pistols played?
They played at the Lesser Free Trade Hall, which I don't know if that was in the basement or that was somewhere else. But yeah, the actual Free Trade Hall was kind of like a sort of theatre basically. And I mean, I'd gone there for like, I went to this like sort of posh convent school in Altrincham, and we'd had our speech day there, which was kind of like, you know, there's an orchestra and stuff like that. So it was a more sort of formal venue, and they weren't used to having rock bands that much. And so the Smiths turned up, and there's all these different tiers, and there's like 3 different tiers. And it's, if you had a ticket for the top tier, you weren't going to just sit there and watch the Smiths. If you could try and sneak down, everybody kind of came down to the bottom and kind of crowded it. And there was like a big crush, and seats were collapsing, and apparently somebody like broke their leg and stuff. And I was just like sort of watching it kind of slightly disinterestedly, and I went out to write a note to Morrissey to say like, would you do an interview for my fanzine? And my friend who managed to work on the t-shirt stall as part of her work experience from school, which was quite a coup, she said, give it here, and she started writing like, why are you letting this happen, and why don't you stop the concert because it's dangerous and the chairs are broken, and And then she passed it back to me, and I went, yeah, right, bye, love, Karren. And well, okay, I wasn't as polite as that. The Smiths had just moved to Manchester. Sorry, the Smiths had just moved to London, and so I said, would you do an interview for my fanzine? When you're back in Manchester, remember Manchester, which is not really exactly the most diplomatic thing to say, but I wasn't a very diplomatic, you know, I was basically like bratty, like, you know, so yeah, that's why I got this. So I got up one morning, got ready for school, there's a letter on the radiator, like with really mad handwriting on the envelopes, like, what's that? Oh my god, Morrissey is upset. Yeah, It was pretty weird. Yeah, that was the Morrissey
Are
letter.
you still in contact with anyone that you worked on Ablaze with, or that you interviewed?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm sort of, yeah, in some kind of contact with, yeah, pretty much everyone that I worked with. And Gavin, who worked on Ablaze, still helps me with my publishing stuff. People that I interviewed, yeah, I think a lot of them. It's a big question because, you know, in the world of social media, it's like, in a way, you never really have to lose anybody, do you? Like, you kind of catch up with a lot of people. But yeah, there's a lot of people that I don't know where they are now. Best people that were famous. I always had this kind of attitude that I always felt like if somebody their career was really progressing and they were getting famous, that I didn't want to have too much to do with them, because I always felt like they're going to have, you know, plenty of other things to do, which is almost kind of like you would shun them a bit because you just assume that they didn't want to know you.
So like humble yourself.
Yeah, I would just always assume that even though we were friends before, that once they were famous they wouldn't want to. And that wasn't always true, because some people would kind of turn around and go, actually, you know, you helped us, and it'd be like, what, we helped you? Like, you're famous? And da, da, da. So
Who did that?
Mercury Rev, like a singer of Mercury Rev, was like really, really grateful to us, like, you know, after they were like quite big, and it was kind of like, what, are you sure? Like, you know. And probably the nicest thing, and it's a little bit more indirect, is this is just somebody that read the fanzine, and they read it like a long time after it came out. It was Gary Jarman from the Cribs. This was before he was in the Cribs. He got a copy of Ablaze 10, and apparently he said it really inspired him to kind of create his own scene, like to set up like a rehearsal studio or something like that and start making music. And it was from that, with other influences as well obviously, but this was like part of the influence that led to that. The way that he treated that, because of the sort of human being that he is that he would never forget, that he'd never forget the people that inspired him to get into the position that he's in now. So that's like a really beautiful quality, that he would remember the influence, he'd kind of attribute something to that. So he wrote something in here as well about that.
What bands or artists are you a fan of now?
Oh my god, I don't know, because I don't listen to that much new music. I mean, in terms of like stuff that's happening now, like I kind of like of Montreal, I really like Joanna Newsom. I have to kind of wrap my brains a bit. Yeah, so some more listen to like old stuff. Like I started listening to Throwing Muses the other day, and found out that my cat really likes Throwing Muses, so we kind of listened to quite a lot of the back catalogue together. Just bits and bobs. I mean, there's kind of, you know, there's decades of really interesting stuff. I was really, really liking Sleaford Mods, because I put them on the front of here, but I think I'm less interested in them now.
Have you heard of Slaves, who are quite similar to Sleaford Mods but more current?
I haven't listened to them. What are they like?
They're basically like, people my age, they're really into them, like they're punk, but people like don't like Sleaford Mods my age, because they're like, oh, you're ripping off Slaves, but obviously they're before Slaves. So.
Yeah. Okay, well I'll listen to them. Yeah. Yeah, I would really, really like to hear new stuff that is good, because the trouble is that a lot of the time I'm checking out new things, and it's like I'm finding there's like nothing at all inspiring about it. I'm finding things are really derivative. I get emails from like PR companies still, and so I can kind of get an idea of what's coming out. And there was one, you know, you misread something, I thought it said Field Music new album, I'm like, oh, Field Music, you know, they're great. Some of them were in this other band called The Week That Was like even better a few years ago. It wasn't Field Music, they were called Field Medic, and I clicked on one of their videos, and it was just like, no, this is just like the worst thing I've ever seen ever. So I'm kind of being constantly disappointed. I feel this is the point where I should remember, like, yeah, so really cool bands. Oh yeah, Shopping, from London, they're totally amazing. Yeah, I saw them play with Autobodies from Leeds. That was one of those bands from Leeds I really like, but they've split up now. Yeah, there is a lot of really cool bands around, but I can't go to gigs anymore because I'm like my health stuff, so I'm like quite a lot kind of disconnected from it. So I just see things on the internet.
Is there anything in Manchester that you've seen recently in the music scene that's caught your eye?
Yeah, there's that band Ill that I mentioned before. Oh, as an aside, because this isn't Manchester, one of my favourite artists is Saul Williams, and if I did do another issue of Ablaze, it would basically be all about Saul Williams, but he's not done anything like in the last few years. I think he's working on a film at the moment, so because he's like an actor as well. He's like actor, poet, writer, musician.
Would you say you're still passionate about music?
I can be. I think I'm more passionate about social change because that's what I feel that's where I need to put my energy now. So yeah, I don't really want to, for example, sit around on Facebook kind of talking about music because it's too easy to do and there's too much. When you've got something like yesterday, the British government decided to revoke the citizenship of a teenage girl who'd been groomed by terrorists, and you know, of all the crimes that anybody's committed in this country and of all the criminals, like from, you know, starting at one end from like Tony Blair, going through all, you know, the rapists and the murderers and all of that, the one crime that they decided was worthy of revoking someone's right to citizenship for was that of being a teenage girl that had been groomed by terrorists. When you've got that scale of injustice, and then you've got, like, you know, I don't know, like probably 2/3 of the people in the country going, yes, do it. And it's like, it's breaking international law and it's fascist, you know, and that's just like an indicator of where things are going. You know, I can't really focus on music too much. Yeah, because there's too much that needs to change.
But you can be passionate about both.
Yeah, but you can't be passionate about everything, in terms of like where your energy goes, and like we've only got so much energy, and a lot of my energy is having to go into like disability rights stuff, like just so that I can personally survive as well. So it's like, you know, and we're under like so much pressure politically at the moment. Like, you're young, so you won't know, it didn't used to be like this. There didn't used to be this, I don't know if you can feel it, but this massive sense of pressure of like, when you've got a government that are completely screwing everything up, and it's everybody is emotionally like up to here with it. It didn't used to be like that. It was more like you could kind of get on and live your life and sort of pursue your creative pursuits and stuff like that, whereas now everything's like really intense and emotional and, you know, overwhelming.
What else would you say you're passionate about?
My spiritual practice, because in my final analysis, that's all you can do is spiritual practice, using it to turn yourself into the most powerful person that you can in order to benefit other people in the end. Because you can do as much kind of shouting and trying to use your power in other ways, but unless you personally become very, very powerful as a force for good, then you can't, you know, you can't really make things better.
What's the best gig you ever went to?
Oh, a lot of gigs are flashing through my mind. Okay, I'm going to say Nation of Ulysses at the Duchess of York. So I don't know if you've read about Nation of Ulysses. In that, they're a band from Washington DC, sort of 5 boys doing this kind of incendiary post-punk music that was kind of tongue-in-cheek, but I didn't experience it like that. Very, very stylish. The singer would come on stage like combing his 50s hairstyle, whilst the shoes of everybody in the band was on fire, and I'm there like, oh my god, you're gonna burn the venue down. But quite intense performance. It's sort of band where the singer would like generally break something during the performance, like in his own body, not like anything else. Yeah, generally break a bone or something.
Were there any really well-known gigs that you went to?
Yeah. Yeah, I went to lots of big gigs, but I think that the ones that are most special to me are the really small gigs. I mean, I used to really, really love The Cure, so I could only ever see The Cure at big gigs because I'm not old enough to have been to see them at small gigs. But I think small gigs are usually the best, you know, the ones that, you know, there might only be like 50 people. I've seen the Stone Roses play to like 3 people in London, you know, or 4. Me and my mate and I think a couple of Japanese girls. So I'll just say best big gig, maybe Nirvana at Bradford U, because they were quite good that night.
Stemming from the Riot Girl movement, do you think that since then women have gotten greater empowerment and equality within the alternative music industry?
I think we're moving towards it. I think we're learning to be more outspoken, a little bit more confident about our rights. I think there's more women playing music. There's a big difference now is that there's a little bit more of a sense of equality, whereas it used to be like if you were a girl in a band, it was like, or if there's, you know, some girls in a band, it was like, it was really obviously and ostensibly like it's a girl band, or there's a girl in a band, it was like a big deal. Whereas now it's like if you talk about it, if you talk about the fact that somebody's female in a band, it's like why you know, why do you have to mention that? Like, why do you have to draw attention to this person's gender because they're a musician? That's a big shift, you know, that's taken quite a long time. I hope that we're all feeling a lot more empowered. I think we are, but there's still a long way to go because the patriarchy still exists all over the world, and it's got a different flavour everywhere you go, and there's like different battles to fight everywhere you go, unfortunately.
Do you still think that happens in independent music where people point out that a female singer?
That happens in music journalism, yeah. I think I saw it, I don't know if it was in The Guardian or something, I saw a piece where I think it was Steve Malkmus from Pavement, who's now in the Jicks, who he was writing about his favourite artists, and the editor had put in brackets that they were like female and stuff like that. They'd actually edited it to kind of put that in, which was really like gross. And on a slightly different front, I mean, there's still an inequality. A lot of the time, like festival lineups will come out, see it on social media because people will go, where are the women? Like, you know, we'll count it now and we'll say what the percentage is, and we'll go back to the venue organisers and go, what are you doing? What is this? It's 2019, like, you're not including us because there's loads and loads and loads of amazing female artists. On a slightly different front, a friend of mine who's a sound engineer who's a trans man started out being a sound engineer as a woman, and when he became a man, suddenly found that he was respected. Suddenly found that people were there like, oh mate, oh thanks, that's really great, and they were treating him as an equal. Whereas before that it was like, you don't know anything about what you're doing, do you? Nothing had changed. It was the same person with the same skills but a different gender, and it was a completely different absence of respect for being a woman doing that job. So unfortunately it's still all going on. So the best thing we can do is work together and keep talking about it and laugh in the face of it.
Are there any female artists that stand out to you?
I'd say loads. Probably the one that I'm like the most in love with is Katie Harkin. She was in this band in Leeds called Skylarkin for a few years, and I didn't see them enough, and I didn't realise how completely amazing they were. I wrote a lot about her in The Last Ablaze, and you've probably seen her playing with Sleater Kinney. Like, she plays with Sleater Kinney in the live lineup. Sleater Kinney, they were amazing. They're like a little bit kind of historical now. Joanna Newsom, I think, is a goddess. I don't think she's of this world. There's just loads of amazing female artists.
Is there any particular female-filled bands that you like?
To be honest, I don't really like bands that don't have women in, you know, because they would be really boring bands. So pretty much everything I like is got women playing in those bands, like Cowtown and Shopping.
Who do you think's the most inspirational?
Musically, I'd say Katie Harkin with a Skylarkin material. Yeah, she needs to be known. She needs to be shouted about.
What do you think of the future of the independent music industry?
Oof.
Or of independent music in general? Alternative music in general?
I guess they're doing stuff online. Technically, I'd say there's great potential, but I'd be expecting to hear like lots of amazing things from different directions, and I'm not doing, maybe I'm just not listening to the right things or the right people. I don't really feel qualified to say. I want to add that I've just missed out an artist that I should have mentioned called Sarah Statham, who was in this band Esper Scout in Leeds, and now she's doing a solo project called Fig by Four, and you should check that out because she's got an album coming out really soon.
Do you feel like Ablaze inspired others who are into music journalism?
Yeah, I think so. I think it did inspire other people to do fanzines and stuff. Back then in the 80s especially, that there wasn't that many people, like that many women doing fanzines. And I guess because my involvement with Riot Girl stuff connected with a lot of inspirational energy that way, that's been quite like transformative for us culturally and personally.
Is there anything else you want to add?
I think I'm alright.
Thank you.
Thank you.